Dobby's not here. I might not be here eventually, but I am here.
That's all that matters, as long as you can sign the blue sheet.
I don't know if I can do that though. Officially complicated. What's the date today? The 20th.
It's no longer show that at least you will have more people in the room that can play the meeting yesterday.
Oh, right. So, three.
Yeah, it's something like that. It conflicted kind of badly with some other things. Unfortunately, travel.
Other things like that.
I don't remember. I just remember that there were two other places I made.
ABCD or something like that. Don't know what it stands for.
Travel.
Was that late?
No, it was two different. ABCD,
Show.
Gaia, Babel, Link State Vector,
Yeah.
Traffic Engineering, Architecture and Signaling, Suit, and RMCAT.
So it was soup.
Suit was also at the same time session. That's a pretty effed up session right there. But I ended up in Suit, but then again,
And I confess, I actually went to Gaia.
you did. You said you weren't.
Well, they actually had a whole bunch of people talking about real deployments that they had done. Various difficult places, Indonesia, different places in Africa. I'll do a little bit better off with that.
Nah. It was a very short meeting. We were done in half an hour.
The work we were doing in that area got cut short when our client got up to the point of owing us about $150,000. Which we still haven't managed to beat out of them.
That's when you said stop. That's when I stopped. Don't me.
Yeah, I have a second thing, but I don't think that would be necessary.
Fill it up.
I mean, how many slots are on one sheet? How many seats are here?
116. Okay.
There's 160 slots there. I don't know if 160 people would fit. Safely. I'm sure you could.
So, welcome, Lou. Did you happen to see Rick?
No.
Okay. Well, we should get started. I think. Oh, yeah. So, welcome to the MANET Working Group meeting at IETF 106. This is the note well. Even if this is your very first IETF meeting, you probably should have seen this a couple of times before this week. But do take note of what is listed there. This is not going to be a regular run-of-the-mill working group session. And the reason is known to most of us. The chair of this working group, Stan Ratliff, passed away on October 22nd. Therefore, we will have a short session, and afterwards we will have an informal get-together in the bar in the Stamford Hotel on the ground floor. Everybody here is obviously invited to go there. So the idea is to keep this session as short as possible. Just do a document status update. There will be no presentations. And as soon as we're done, we're out of here. This is the agenda. I would appreciate at least a note taker. Thank you, Adam. JavaScript, maybe. So, document status. We have one document in the RFC editor queue. This is the link ID extension of DLab. Of which Stan Ratliff was an author. Rick Taylor is an author. Then we have one document, the DLab latency extension, that has been approved, but I think some technicalities need to be fixed in the document, and it has been in that state for a very long time, over 100 days. So authors are invited to do something there. I think the action is with the authors, but correct me if I'm wrong.
The authors aren't aware, so
Okay. Okay, then we have 3 documents that are in working group last call status and have been for a while. They had expired at the beginning of September. One of the authors in the audience, Lou, has refreshed them, revived them this very morning. So they're now active again. My idea on these documents is that I don't think there have been a lot of comments during this extended working group last call period.
I actually did, you may notice that there's some changes in each of the documents. At the time the comments came in, this is Lou Berger, I made the changes to the document but didn't push them. So I believe that any comment that has been received has been addressed, but it's been a while. So, we should go through the list and go through them.
Okay, so they might actually have newer content than the ones that expired.
Do. They all have very small
That's good.
changes. I'll have to go through it and figure out what all those changes were because it was a while ago.
So what I propose to do then is to do a quick new working group last call.
Perfect.
Ending, let's say, 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now. Don't know where
We've been
it is.
waiting so long. You
Yeah.
know, whatever you do is fine.
And then I guess I get to be the shepherd of these documents. So that will be a new experience as well.
Is this your last slide?
This is not my last slide.
Then I'll sit down.
It's my last slide on document status anyway. So what else is left after we get these documents out the door? Well, Lou Berger made a presentation at the previous IETF on DLab multicast issues. The link is given in the slides. The idea is that this will result in an internet draft. And Lou has volunteered to kick this off, to take this over from Stan, actually. And we're aiming for having an internet draft somewhere in January. And I'm willing to help in any way I can to progress this work, because I also think personally that it's interesting.
Yeah, I talked to, this is Lou Berger again. I talked to David about it, that the slide presentation was actually joint work with David Wiggins. I talked to him about jumping on, trying to get a draft out. Briefly, we talked about trying to push it for this meeting when we heard about Stan. I thought that was a little tight. So we should be able to do that. And we're happy to send you a first draft that with what we put together and collaborate on it, if you're willing.
Yes, that will be excellent. Thank you.
And there was also one or two other implementation details that David has run across that we were thinking of putting into one draft rather than running it as a second draft. We don't have to talk the technical details now, but if you want, we can do it offline.
Good. We don't have any other pending work, any other pending internet drafts, I should say. If you look at our charter.
So this was what I was going to ask on the prior slide. We had an agreement about 2 or 3 meetings ago to do an adoption call on a fourth document. And so
I have missed that one. Apologies.
Yeah, so in terms of the prior slide where we were talking about documents, I think we had one more that had been discussed in the working group, and the intent was to do an adoption call on it. So I would hope that we could do that adoption call.
And
It's the
what was that about?
the Ethernet flow control.
Ethernet flow control.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it may have even been like a year ago that we had agreed to do an adoption call, and it wasn't happening.
Right.
It had been an appendix as an example, and we decided just in a session, we said, let's make it a real document. So we did that work and said we were going to adopt it. And then, anyway.
Things happened.
So I'd hope to add that back to the list and maybe get that adoption call started right after this meeting. I don't think we should wait another cycle just to have it presented again, but if that's what needs to be done, we can do that too.
No. I will send an email to the link to the list with a link to the document, and then ask people to check on it and say if they're okay with adopting it as a working group document. I had a look at our charter, and we're doing fine in the DLab extensions department. We've got that covered. However, the charter also mentions multicast work and documenting challenges and best practices on deploying and managing manets. I don't think very much has happened there over the past few years. So the question would be, what do we do with that? Are we obliged to address that?
Rick Taylor. So ironically, Stan and I were just putting pen to paper for a DLEP extension for sparse mode PIM. But obviously events have overtaken that slightly. So, and it's still early days, so it wasn't quite ready to come here.
Right,
we haven't worked out whether it was any good. But again, that's DLEP extensions, not multicast MANET routing.
I wonder if I about anything. So you asked, do we have to do what's in the charter? Ideally, yes. But it depends, of course, on what the work group thinks it has energy to deliver that. That specific item in the charter was actually the result of compromise that we got into many years ago with the ops ADs, because we had a similar item in the charter. There was a document that was produced that ended up being OSR specific, and we in the AAG decided not to publish that draft. But when we came back to recharter MANET at that time, we wanted to add that item in here. so that we wouldn't forget. So, at the time there was apparently interest by someone to do it, but
Yeah.
maybe not anymore.
Okay. Maybe another question to put to the mailing list. If there's anybody out there who could contribute
So
something.
Rick Taylor again. Confession time. I'm actively working on multicast back at home at work, and I've looked at SMF, and I'm actually looking at the stuff that's coming out of PIM and looking at doing variations there. And I'm actually unconvinced whether what we're doing is particularly MANET unique. I mean, it may be some ways to make what PIM source-specific sparse mode is doing in terms of picking out the tree and things like that, whether you can tweak that to work better in MANETs or in networks that look a lot like some types of MANET. If it was to be something I wrote up, I would probably take it back to PIM, because they're the guys who really know about this stuff. And I remember it was Brian Adamson and Justin's team who were looking heavily at SMF, etc., and they're not here anymore. So I don't know what I'm trying to say about that, but that's a comment.
I wrote that running AD. So yeah, that goes back to the same point about the last thing, which is actually your last bullet, right? We need to, if at some point, or at some point, we need to discuss, where do we go, right?
Yeah.
What are the new items? Do we pick up any of the old stuff? I do remember Justin saying at one point that, yes, he had been working on multicast, but that because of work constraints, he couldn't bring it here. Not that he didn't want to, but he couldn't bring it here yet.
Stucard. So just looking at the precise words in the charter, it says we will do liaison with the PIM working group. It also says we will do multicast based upon SMF. So there's a little bit of a conflict built right in.
Sorry, Rick Taylor again. As a follow-on comment about SMF, I know moving around industry thinks SMF is a protocol ready to go. And I've had the conversations with them to say, well, no, it's I believe, an experimental draft that discusses some best practices.
It's an experimental RFC.
Experimental RFC, sorry, that talks about best practices when doing tense mode flooding. It's not a solution. So there's a danger that if MANET stops and says, well, SMF is good enough, people might think it is good enough, and I'm not convinced it is. There's a second point to this, which is a lot of the very MANET-specific multicast topics are kind of being picked up at the link layer now. A lot of the meshing radios are doing multicast that's tuned to their link layer technologies. So I would be pushing, if we were to go down the multicast route, it would be talking about maintaining multicast in heterogeneous link layer technology MANETs.
Right.
And that's starting to drift heavily into PIM again, and I know we're supposed to be PIM liaising. I don't have an answer, it's just...
Okay. I don't want to go into deep technical discussions right now, because the reasons I just pointed out. As much as this, I'm personally interested in this topic, but take it to the list, I think. So yes, we need to get more energy in the group. I've been talking with our AD earlier this week. I have a couple of ideas. Also to bring back some OLSR work, maybe, because otherwise we could rename ourselves to the DLab working group, almost. I do have an idea myself on another DLab data item. I need to check whether that actually holds water, but I'm hoping to write it up and have it ready also somewhere in January. So that would be something. And then there's the presentation that I gave last time on inter-MANET routing. That's outside the scope of our current charter. At that meeting in Montreal, some people expressed interest in working on that. Since I have also had email from somebody from outside this community who was interested in that, I have encouraged this person to take that to our mailing list. That hasn't happened yet. So that would be another thing to pick up some topics that are not covered by our current charter, but then we would need to recharter, and I can see that there has to be some evidence that there are people there actually doing the work for that to go down well with our AD and the ISG in general, I think. So that sort of brings me to the last agenda item. We have some things to mull over with respect to where this group is going. And I think we can do that in the few weeks to come. At the same time, Lou and Dave and myself will be working on this new drafts. And then the idea is to have an interim meeting well before Vancouver, but also allowing for some time to do some actual work. So my idea about this, and I'm putting this to you, is to do this end of January or beginning of February 2020. I don't know whether anyone has any opinions on that.
Rick Taylor, I think that makes a lot of sense. The timing is good. Yeah.
Virtual or physical?
Virtual.
Thank you.
WebEx, it says. So with that, I'm at the end of the agenda. So unless anybody has any other business,
Albert, without running anything. Yeah, I just want to say one thing really quick. I know we need to be at the bar in 3 minutes for the start of the informal Stan Ratliff tribute barb-off. I have about 5 minutes, maybe 3, to say something at the plenary about Stan. If you guys want to be there, it would be great. That's it. Thanks. No, it's actually towards the beginning. So there's all the reports. Well, okay, it's towards the end before the open mics. Correct. So there's all the reports at the beginning, and then there's the John Postel Award or something. And then there's the in memoriam section. There's 3 people we're going to remember this time. And the third one is Stan. So I'm going to spend 3 to 5 minutes, something really quick, talking about him. Thanks.
okay, thank you. And with that, meeting adjourned, and let's go to the bar of the Stamford.
Sorry, I'm going to upload it. Can I see what first slide is that the document status?
Well, that was my some slide.
That's right. The document set the RC editor key. Just.
That's what it says in the data track.
Yeah, it does, but I wondered if you know anything about that.
I think at some point I even saw already an RFC number.
Things.
Yes,
I wrote physically here, so I have to translate back, but I'll get to you
Yeah,
tonight.
but thanks for doing this.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, I tried to keep it as.
No, no, I mean, I just highlighted,
You said this, you said this, you said this, you said this. I'll be able to write.
Oh,
So,
I tried to be specific where I could, but just caught my eye.
after midnight, I will be on an airplane for 12 hours and
What time do you fly out?
1:30.
Oh,
We fly out at 1:30 now, Sunday.
I think
12:30.
I think I'm at 12:30 on Friday, but I mean.
Thank you.
So I just want to mention. Yeah, Bob.
Again? Are you drinking? I'm not calling it a bad thing. I just wanted to make sure that I did hear you correctly.
This is probably where.
I'm going again. Oh, come on.
Yeah, let's go.
yeah, I'm gonna do one thing.
We abandoned you. Goodbye. Then we get up close.
What do you do? Is the whole lot to the secretary?
Yeah, you drop it off at this secretariat desk, right out here. Just, no, just the paper.
Ah, okay.
How often?